Hi, good evening. Welcome to Dead Air Live. My name's Laurel Greenberg. And if you don't already know, Dead Air Live is one of the longest running public access shows in the country. And I was a member of Dead Air Live for 10 years. 2 years ago, I left the group to work on an independent documentary. And I spent a total of 3 years working on it, and I just finished it in September. It's called Trouble in Paradise, and we're going to see some clips from it later in the show. The title of tonight's show is Bush, Iraq, Election 2004, Artists, Authors, Activists Respond. So I'm one of those people who is responding, and I have guests on the show tonight who are also responding to the incredible events that are going on in our country right now. Later in the show, towards the end, we're even going to see the new trailer from Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11, which is opening nationwide on June 25th. Very exciting. So I hope you stay through the whole show. My first guest on the show tonight is John Bonifaz, who is an attorney here in Boston, and he's an author of a book called Warrior King. Welcome to the show, John.
Thank you for having me, Laurel.
Yeah.
Pleased to be here.
I'm very excited to talk about this book of yours. There's a still of it, there it is. And this is about a case, a lawsuit that you filed and tried against George Bush just before he launched the attack in Iraq. And the subtitle of the book is called The Case for Impeaching George W. Bush. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the book and why is it called that?
Sure. Well, I wrote this book really to highlight what happened with this case and its meaning for the United States Constitution. The president is not a king. He does not have the power to take the nation into war. Only the United States Congress has that power under the War Powers Clause of the U.S. Constitution. And the president took this nation into an illegal war against Iraq. Congress never authorized the war. It never declared war, and the president never received such authorization. And so on behalf of a coalition of United States soldiers, parents of soldiers, and members of Congress, we sued the president and Secretary Rumsfeld on the eve of the war to try and stop him from taking this nation into this illegal war. And we now see the dangers of having one individual, the chief of the executive branch, decide for the nation whether or not to take the nation to war. We never deliberated, we never debated, we never talked about the consequences of what it would mean to go to war against Iraq. It was not done with the people's consent, and the president should now be held accountable for his flouting of the United States Constitution.
Well, I think as we can see in polls and in how the press is now responding and how Americans in general feel, that this was one, as Charlie Rose says, one of the possibly the biggest mistakes in military history in the last 100 years, at least. I'm interested in going into a little more detail about, about the book and the case. I'm guessing that a lot of people maybe don't know about it. I didn't know about it until I saw your book in a Brattleboro, Vermont bookstore. But you say that you filed the lawsuit on behalf of U.S. soldiers and their parents. Tell me a little bit about how that worked and why you needed them to sue.
Well, the soldiers, of course, were facing direct harm with the president's illegal actions. They were the ones being sent off into battle to face possible injury and possible death because of the president's illegal actions. You know, this is not a private army. This is not an army that the president can just decide will be sent off into war at his own personal whim. This is the United States Army representing the United States as a whole, and only we, the people, have the right through our elected representatives in Congress to send them off into battle. And the president really treated them as his private army and sent them off into this illegal war. And the soldiers were the ones really who had the best standing to challenge the president's illegal actions. They filed under seal. Their names were protected so as to not face any retaliation from the military. But they had enormous courage in standing up against this president, and I regard them as heroes for having stood up against this president in this illegal war.
Now, when you went to trial, George Bush was not there in the courtroom, but there were representatives of lawyers for him there.
Top attorneys in the United States Justice Department representing the President and Secretary Rumsfeld, arguing before a federal district court judge and then before a federal appeals court that the President had inherent power as Commander-in-Chief to take the nation to war, regardless of what Congress thought. I mean, this is extraordinary. This is an extreme claim made that doesn't have any precedent in the case law, nor any precedent in the Constitution or what the framers intended. The framers of the Constitution knew full well the dangers of having one individual have the power to take the nation into war. They wanted to separate this country from European monarchs of the past who would send their subjects off into battle on their own personal whim. And yet the President, through his attorneys, were essentially arguing something even the framers disagreed with.
So how did it happen? The October resolution made it happen.
The October resolution that Congress passed was a resolution essentially transferring unlawfully to the President the decision-making power to go to war. And Congress cannot transfer to the President its exclusive power to declare war any more than it can transfer its exclusive power to levy taxes. So it was really a blank check that Congress gave to the President. How did this happen? I think in part it's a response to 9/11. It's now a determination by this President to seize whatever monarchical powers he can to claim that he's doing this in the name of national security. It's extremely scary and extremely dangerous, and it requires that all of us as concerned citizens rise up against it and demand that this President be held accountable for his illegal actions. The President is not a king. This remains a democracy if we're going to fight for it, and we have a Constitution that remains there, and we must fight for it as well.
So tell us what happened. This case was tried in Boston. Is that because you were the attorney that represented the soldiers?
I was one of the attorneys. I was the lead attorney along with others, and we were here in Boston, but also some of our clients were located here.
Okay, and this was on February 23rd, 2003. And tell me what happened in court.
Well, the first judge we had, Federal Judge Joseph Toro of the District Court, happened to be the same judge 30 years ago who heard a case dealing with the illegal bombing of Cambodia during the Vietnam War and Nixon's secret bombing along with Henry Kissinger of Cambodia. And that case at that time was heard before Judge Toro as well, and Judge Toro decided then that he had no role as a judge to intervene, that Congress and the President were not in conflict, and not being in conflict, he would not intervene. Of course, by definition, this means that Congress can collude with the President to trample on the United States Constitution, and the federal judiciary has no role. Clearly, the federal judiciary has a role to uphold and protect the United States Constitution, and this judge chose to sit on the sidelines. He dismissed the case. We immediately got an expedited review before the Federal Appeals Court, which is often unheard of. It takes months, if not years, to get before a Federal Appeals Court. We were there in 2 weeks' time. And we got a much better hearing before a 3-judge panel there, and they had tough questions for both sides. But in the end, they too stayed on the sidelines and refused to intervene. I think they all were scared by the demands that a president was making through his attorneys, that he have this incredible amount of power to march into Iraq, march the nation into war, and they were not going to stand in the way. And it's a sad story, a reality of all 3 institutions letting us down, all 3 democratic institutions undermining the Constitution. And it requires now, I think, a demand from all of us as citizens to hold up the Constitution to the faces of those who would dare to defy it and to demand our country back.
So what might have happened if you had won that lawsuit?
Well, first, it would have required Congress to actually debate and deliberate whether or not we should go to war. And I don't think necessarily that Congress would have granted authorization to go to war, to debate whether or not the nation wants to go to war unilaterally without any kind of support, real support from allies around the world, to debate what kind of consequences we would face, both in terms of taxpayer costs as well as lives for our sons and daughters sent off into battle. All of that now we face. We face billions of dollars in taxpayer costs. We face hundreds of lives lost on the United States soldier side, thousands of Iraqi civilians dead, a war that continues to spiral out of control. And none of these costs, none of these consequences were presented to the American people from the beginning.
It's just incredible. again, from Charlie Rose, I was watching his interview with Bob Woodward and about his new book. And at the very end of the book, he says he puts in this part where he asks Bush, how do you think history will view Iraq? And Bush pauses momentarily, and then he says, well, we won't know. We'll all be dead. Which is like, I'll let you think about that and draw your own conclusions. I wanted, if you could, to read something from the book. It's actually not something you wrote, but it's something that Senator Robert Byrd of West Virginia read. He was very much against this October resolution.
Absolutely.
That basically gave Bush the ability to go make the decision to go to war on his own. And he reads from a speech from a very different time, but the similarity is striking and quite chilling. If you could tell me what that
Sure.
I know you know what I'm referring to.
Absolutely. I mean, this was the final actual speech he gave, Senator Byrd gave on October 10th, 2002. Rose for a final time in objection to the October resolution, imploring his colleagues to vote against it. And he quoted Hermann Goering, the founder of the Gestapo, the president of the Reichstag, the Nazi parliament, and a convicted war criminal. In a 1934 speech, Goering said this: "Naturally, the common people don't want war, but after all, it is the leaders of a country who determine the policy, and it is always a simple matter to drag the people along. Whether it is a democracy or a fascist dictatorship, or a parliament or a communist dictatorship, voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked and denounce the pacifists for a lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in every country."
Now, I mean, you included that because it's just so incredible. And I mean, in light of everything that's happened, how does this make you feel now, knowing all this?
Well, it shows that we have to stop this march down what is essentially a road to tyranny. We cannot allow somebody who claims to be president of the United States seizing powers of a king. It is something we have to rise up and demand accountability for. The president, in my view, has committed impeachable offenses. He has committed the highest of all political crimes. He has sent this nation into an illegal war, resulting in the deaths of thousands. He has lied to the United States Congress and to the American people about the reasons for sending the nation to war. He has apparently, according to Bob Woodward's book, secretly diverted monies appropriated for another war in Afghanistan, $700 million of taxpayer funds, to the war in Iraq without any congressional authorization. This is a president who continues to flout the law. He's gone beyond the bounds of the Constitution, and he defies the rule of law, and he deserves to be faced with impeachment proceedings.
Okay, and in closing, let me just ask you, how do you think history will treat the war in Iraq?
I think history will treat the war in Iraq as one of the darkest moments of United States history, and hopefully also a moment in which people of the United States demanded their democracy and their country back.
Thank you. Again, the book is Warrior King. John Bonifaz, an attorney and author here in Boston. And where can someone find the book if they want it?
At bookstores as well as online, nationbooks.org. Nation Books is the publisher, as well as the Amazon.com.
Okay, great. Thanks. And we'll be back with more guests.
There's a huge number of American citizens that saw what happened in 2000 in outrage.
You got to believe what happened in Florida was real.
People were voting and their votes weren't being counted.
Out of that outrage came a conviction that this shall never happen again.
I really really didn't have any experience. I was going to volunteer for one day. Next thing you know, I mean, here I am. I just saw the outrageous things that happened, and I felt compelled to do it. It did something to some of us, and it just changed our lives.
Currently, Florida leads the nation in the percentage of its citizens that it disenfranchises.
And I said, why am I ineligible to vote? They said, because you are a felon.
The Brennan Center for Justice, along with other civil rights advocates, are representing Thomas Johnson and a class of over 600,000 Florida citizens who can't vote because of a past felony conviction.
Within 2 days after the election, we were already organizing the first protests in West Palm Beach.
Our campaign was No More Bush It.
Florida is ground zero. We won the state for Gore. Where is the demand for a federal investigation and what has to happen in our state and in our country?
There are a lot of people who still maintain the attitude that their vote isn't going to count, but then we have to go back and remind them that they need to elect people who are going to be making the laws that they live by, and for no other reason than that, they need to be involved in the process of voting.
I'm Larry Winower. I'm running for county commission. Before election 2000, I just really was just going along, and now after election 2000, put myself deeper and deeper into the process. You really see in ways that you can't imagine how critical elected officials are.
September 11th made the election look small.
With the 9/11 incident, I think that it's going to have some spillover into our governor's race.
I love being a Democrat, but we've got to take back our party and we've got to take back our country.
We're going to elect a Democratic governor in Florida in November of this year.
An ex-felon moves to Florida from another state. Why do these people still need to apply for clemency from the governor?
I'm not, are you certain that they do? I'm sorry, I'm just not familiar with that absolute fine point.
What she was doing was burying her head in the sand. She knows well what's going on.
You know, all of our polling places have been screwed up.
The primary in September was just chaos. It was, in some people's minds, a repeat of 2000.
People may be discouraged and they may not understand what's at stake here, but I can tell you, America is looking at you.
Yes, I want to be your advocate. Yes, I want to be your county commissioner.
Welcome back. I'm Laurel Greenberg, and that was a trailer for a film that I just finished called Trouble in Paradise. And it's going to be screening this month, June 2004, June 27th at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. So you can see the whole thing there. It's going to be screened with a short film called Today I Vote for My Joey by filmmaker Aviva Kempner. And my guests on the set for this segment are three people from organizations in the Boston area, two of which are actually sponsoring that screening at the Museum of Fine Arts. So let me go around and introduce who's here. We have Pam Wilmot from Common Cause, Massachusetts, and Jonathan Levitt from the Boston Social Forum, and Atia Dangleben from Boston Vote. Let's just first go around and briefly tell me some, people have heard a little bit about your organizations, but maybe we can get a sense of what you guys are doing. Common Cause and Boston Social Forum, I should say, are the two groups that are co-sponsoring the screening of Trouble in Paradise. But Pam, let me hear a little bit about what Common Cause Massachusetts is.
Well, Common Cause is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that works for ethics in government. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, And I guess that means that we're always going to be in business. So we've been working for 30 years on issues like campaign finance reform, like starting the state's ethics commission here in Massachusetts. We actually pushed through the Freedom of Information Act back in the 70s, the open meetings laws, the public records laws, all those kinds of process reforms that make government more democratic and more open to average citizens, not for and by the special interests, which unfortunately government always tends to be. We've got a lot of things that are going on right now. Number one, your screening is the big thing that's coming up this month. We just finished an event this past weekend. But one big issue that's somewhat new for us here in Massachusetts, though we've worked across the country on, is redistricting reform. And Atiya's group was very involved in the suit in the Boston districts where those were thrown out by a federal district court for being incumbency protection and the same, at that time violating minority voting rights in the city of Boston. And I think Atiya will tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
But we're taking that and sort of in a bigger perspective and looking at how do we make the system better. And several other states have taken the process of redistricting out of the hands of self-interested legislators who are always protecting their political backsides. At least the ones that are in control of the process, which is a very small number of legislators actually. In the process, they also use it to kind of dole out favors or punish those people who don't support the legislative leadership, and put that into the hands of an independent redistricting commission that would respect the voting rights of minority voters and communities, that would try and keep communities together so that we wouldn't have these districts that look like salamanders and saxophones and all those things. Gerrymandering was actually invented here in Massachusetts. And we're going to be doing that, going out to communities and putting it on some districts for an advisory question. It's the very beginning, and in fact, MassVote is going to be endorsing the question. We'll be working with some other people. There's a lot of papers that think this is a great idea. Of course, legislators are going to be a little difficult to convince. So that's a big thing that we're doing. We're also doing some get out the vote work for young people in the Boston area, particularly with a program called Vote for America.
Okay. All right. So, Atiya, give us a little overview of Boston Vote, and then maybe we can get into some of the redistricting issues.
Sure. Boston Vote is a coalition of nonprofits, nonpartisan nonprofit organizations working to integrate sustainable voter outreach, voter education, and get out the vote practices into what they're doing year-round, 365 days a year. There are health centers and CDCs and neighborhood associations, organizations large and small that realize that sporadic, every 4 years, dropping a lot of money and a lot of people to win an election isn't the way to really shift the power base for their communities and deal with the issues that they face year in and year out. So they're working every day to find ways to integrate civic participation into their existing work. The coalition has been around about 4 years, 5 years, going on 5 years. And we've seen phenomenal increases in voter turnout in traditionally considered low turnout neighborhoods in the area, in the neighborhoods of Boston.
Yeah, tell me, I know that there's some real good statistics of what you guys have done in terms of reaching out to people.
Well, we are a coalition, and so we work with community-based organizations in low turnout neighborhoods. By name, they're Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, Jamaica Plain, parts of the Fenway. They cross the same lines of communities of color, low-income communities, younger communities, really disenfranchised people. But the one thing they have are community institutions that people trust. And what we've seen is the increases have been those that have surpassed citywide averages. Chinatown is a great example. It's a very small community, 180% increase the last few years in that neighborhood, and new people coming out to the polls. Last year we had a city council race in Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan. And that lended itself to phenomenal increases in that neighborhood, a neighborhood that really hadn't had political excitement for a decade. And all of a sudden there was a competition and people cared and came out, and that neighborhood saw a 70% increase. So those types of things, people in communities developing a relationship and creating a political mindset and really taking power and changing the power voting base in Boston. Last year, people were shocked when Felix Arroyo, the first Latino city councilor, was elected because his base was out of nowhere, you know, to people who had kind of followed voting in Boston since the 60s. There's a new base emerging, and it's, you know, in part of the work that nonprofits and community-based organizations have been doing year-round.
Well, I know that apathy is, you know, a big problem in the country in general. So what are some of the things that, like, you know, people from your organization will tell or tell these organizations to convey to the constituents? That what are some of the things to get them motivated? Like,
well, one of the things,
this is the things, these people represent you, and you need to.
Right. I don't say apathy is the problem when I'm working with people. I don't say that, not that it, you know, it isn't true. I don't believe it's true, but I think it's a myth kind of that we've been sold generation after generation that people are lazy or don't care. I think people are cynical. People don't trust the system. You know, a lot of things that Pam pointed out, people feel like special interests control government, and they have a lot of evidence to back it up. So you not voting, I understand. But then at the same time, we look at your education, you know, we look at public transportation, we look at health services, we look at this whole range of issues that affect your daily life and the life of your children and your quality of life day in and day out. And we think about, this isn't the situation I want to be in. How can I make that change? I can opt out of the system and not vote and completely remove myself from power, or I can dive right in it. And if the only thing that I can do is vote, then I'll do that. But if I can vote and if I can organize, you know, people in my community, if I can get involved as a parent, then that's more impact that you'll have and more kind of civic leadership that you'll be able to muster up as a community. But we start with the basics. We start with, if you can cast a vote, if you're 18, if you're a citizen, and you can get out on a Tuesday in November, and this year a Tuesday in September, that's also very important. That's where we start. And so we reach people where they are. If you're at the CDC and you're looking for affordable housing, there is a very direct line between your vote on election day and the availability of your affordable housing, the funding for that organization to stay in existence, and you know, the list goes on and on.
Okay, it's really cool. All right, let me just get to our third guest and an overview of what the Boston Social Forum is.
Sure, the Boston Social Forum is an event that's taken place the weekend right before the Democratic National Convention. And the organizers who initiated it 19 months ago realized that would be a really good jumping off point for a couple of choices that were in front of them. Traditionally, when you're faced with the Democrats or the Republicans, your choice is to protest, to stay at home, to complain, to get into the streets. And people who initiated the social forum and looked at the World Social Forums and what they had brought to a different kind of political dialogue, and realized that why not use it as an opportunity with 15,000 journalists in town, why not use it as an opportunity to really define the progressive movements, to really highlight the beauty of them, the depth of them, the breadth of them, to give people an open space for dialogues between groups that may not be dialoguing enough, to present the whole range of progressive issues as well, from women's liberation to gay and lesbian rights to housing to economic justice to environmental justice to racism to voting rights issues to alternative technologies, transportation, all of these things which we need to create alternatives for or highlight the alternatives that already exist.
So will this be different events going on all over the city, or how will this take place?
There's a little bit of both. I mean, we've held lots of events leading up to it, events with performers like Michelle Schacht and Noam Chomsky, Howard Zinn. We've done a film series, which will have one of your films being shown leading up to the event. We're doing a 24-hour music marathon. We've been doing all sorts of cultural events, presentations in the communities, all leading up to the 23rd through the 25th of July over at UMass Boston. And on those 3 days, there'll be, on the campus, there'll be 400 probably over 400 presentations that could range from workshops to panel discussions to large convocations to music to theater to poetry to installation art to you name it. We're going to show how beautiful the progressive resistance is. And we're going to do it with a sense of humor, with an openness to hearing other voices, with a cross dialogue that doesn't always take place, and it's going to be I think a historical event for this area.
Is it the first of its kind?
It's following the process of the World Social Forums, which have been taking place in last 3 years. Started in Brazil. This year's World Social Forum took place in India. And they were initially in response to the gathering of the G8 economic powers, the World Economic Forums. This will be the first one of any real size here in North America. So I think it's pretty important that being that we sit here in the belly of the beast, that people who do possess so much privilege in comparison to the rest of the world get up and start the fight back.
Okay, I have two questions. One is, how can people, get involved and participate and find out about stuff and sort of tell me, like, is there a cost involved or are there packages? And then two, what if there's somebody out there who wants to, has something to share with the forum or either a piece of art or music or some kind of, add to
the beauty
discussion.
of these social forums, there are a number of real strong points to them. One is there is no ideology. There's no one ideology behind these, with the understanding that we want people to come and expressing progressive ideas and thoughts, but certainly across the range of what is considered progressive ideas and thoughts. The social forum also is self-organized. There's no leadership at the top who is dictating what's going to be talked about, who's going to be doing the talking, how it's going to be presented. It's all been self-organized. So there's actually a website, bostonsocialforum.org, where people can go and actually make their own suggestions for workshops, for seminars, for convocation speakers, for art exhibits, for musical presentations, whatever they want. And we've got enough space and capacity to pretty much take all of them in. So that's one way they can do. They can get involved directly in the programming. And they can also get involved as part of the organizing team for the event. I mean, we really literally need hundreds of volunteers to make this happen. And we welcome any and all participation with people who have a few hours to do anything from, doing phone banking, to doing postering, to helping to coordinate logistics for the events, to helping out with childcare. The event is going to be there's going to be a $30 registration fee for the whole weekend, $15 for low-income people, for seniors, for students. There'll be free childcare the whole weekend itself, so people can come and bring their families. Yeah, and we're looking forward to this being an event that really shows certainly the Democratic Party and in some respects the Republican Party and the rest of the elite that there are some really, really incredible alternatives out there to the kinds of policies that they put forth.
Great. Well, I think we did get the website. I hope we put it up underneath as well. We have your website and on all three websites. If we didn't put them up before, let's do that. Yeah, this is going to be an incredible summer in Boston, not just traffic-wise, but I mean, how is this affecting anything that you're doing? Are you gearing anything to account for the convention being here?
We had talked about organizing a rally kind of after the Boston Social Forum, but for various reasons that's actually not going to happen. I think I'm going to be doing some stuff at the Boston Social Forum. I think it's a great venue for activists to come and learn more and to network and stuff. I certainly have done some media work around kind of the alternative view to having a great party and what that really means, which is actually corporate interest pouring lots and lots of money into the party and hobnobbing with the rich and powerful, and it's all this sort of little incestuous group. Actually, it's going to be close to $100 million spent on this event. Parties need to have conventions, but do they need to spend $100 million? And $100 million to do a lot of things, a lot of great things, including even publicly financing campaigns, which would be a lot better use of that money. But anyways, so there you go.
Okay.
And
Well-
that's mostly, I think that it's going to be interesting being in Boston. That's all right. There are going to be a lot of other events. There probably will be some rally that day. There's things going on in the neighborhoods around some of the different events. It'll be an interesting time to be in Boston.
I know you can also find out information on the DNCC's website. I guess it's, maybe it's just dncc. Do a Google for Democratic National Convention and Democratic National Convention Committee, and you'll find all kinds of things on there. Let's just, I'm not sure how much time we have left in this segment, but let's touch a little bit on some of the really hot issues that Common Cause is, or at least one of them that's Common Cause is working on this. If you want to talk about this thing about the Constitutional Convention agenda, the thing about the Massachusetts initiative.
Yeah, there was a bill filed this year to get rid of the citizens initiative process, and it was actually filed by somebody who is pretty good credentials as a reformer, believe it or not. Just goes to show eternal vigilance is necessary when you're talking about legislative matters. It looks like we've actually stopped that. Common Cause headed a coalition of groups that did a lot of media work, got out in the grassroots and got a lot of emails into legislators, and got the Secretary of State and the Attorney General to oppose this constitutional amendment. It looks like it's pretty well been blocked. We still have to get through, because sometimes you just never know. But I don't think it's going to happen this year. It's become a bad vote. But the redistricting issue, actually, we're going to be doing an advisory question that will be in part of Somerville. So that's something that local people, if they're interested, could get involved with, and they can give us a call or visit the website. In order to get it on the ballot, signatures have to be collected by July 7th. And we're looking at doing one district that bridges Cambridge and Somerville.
Okay, and that, if they want to check the Common Cause website here in Massachusetts, commoncause.org/state/Massachusetts.
Or just /MA.
Oh, /MA. Okay.
Yep.
I know we're running out of time for this segment, but I'm going to push us a little bit into, so just bear with me, control room. I do want to have you talk about some of the important deadlines before we end. The deadlines for registration. We have that up on the screen. I think you know them already, or
sad to say.
So let's hear a little bit about that, and when people have to get out there if they're not registered, and what they have to do to register.
If you are not registered, we have two important elections coming up because contested races are few and far between in this state. Our September 14th primary is a really important election and will decide a lot of legislative races. So you have until August 25th. It's always 20 days before the election to get registered, to get your registration card by mail. You can visit a whole bunch of websites. massvote.org is one of them, and get your card mailed to you. And then you do have to sign and return it. We're not a state that allows you to register online, which is really important because a lot of national organizations are doing online registration. You can go online and you can get your card filled out, but you need to make sure that you mail it in 20 days in advance of that September 14th election. And then our November election is on the 2nd.
Okay, so I have the dates all wrong, and maybe they were last year's dates on the website. Because don't look at those dates. So the deadline to register in the preliminary is August 25th. The preliminary election is September 14th. The deadline to register in the general election is
October 15th.
October 15th.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, and the general election is November 2nd. Okay.
First Tuesday in November.
Right, okay.
It's convenient for the farmers in the 1800s, but we're sticking to it till we change it.
And we still don't have a national holiday on Election Day. Okay.
Working on it.
Well, thank you all for coming on tonight, and if anybody, again, wants to get in touch with these groups, it's bostonvote.org, commoncause.org, and bostonsocialforum.org. And get out there and participate in Boston. It's going to be an interesting and exciting summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Weapons of mass destruction. 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 The smoking gun. Weapons of mass destruction, and he's used them.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Terrorists.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Biological.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Terrorists.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Terrorists.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
It could have a nuclear weapon.
Chemical, biological.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction. Acts of terrorism.
Weapons of mass destruction.
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 It's nuclear.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass terror.
And weapons of mass destruction.
Terrorist acts. Terrorists.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Nuclear weapons.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Biological
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Iran has weapons of mass destruction.
Terrorist threats. Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction.
Biological weapons.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Chemical.
They have weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass terror. Weapons of mass terror. Weapons of mass destruction. Massive death. Weapons of mass destruction.
Terrorism.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of
Mass destruction.
These horrible weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction.
Terrorism. Weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
The mushroom cloud.
Weapons of mass destruction.
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 How great was that? That was such an inspiring little film. And I have the filmmaker here in the studio, Robert Arnold. Thank you for coming on.
It's a pleasure.
You teach filmmaking at Boston University. And I first saw this as part of an experimental film series, the Balagan experimental film series at the Coolidge. And in fact, I was editing my film Trouble in Paradise at the time, and you know, I was really busy. I was editing like day and night, and I thought, you know, I'm going to take a break and go out to see these films. And I came home so inspired that I actually cut a little scene differently because of. Mostly because of your film, but because of sort of just getting a little bit of a different mindset going. So what was going on when you decided to do this?
You know, this was done in the build-up to the eventual war in Iraq. And at the time, actually, I was kind of, I just had hip surgery, so I was kind of laid up and could do little more than watch a lot of TV, which was becoming, you know, rather painful. And the repetition of the phrase "weapons of mass destruction" was just something that was, you know, clear to me as an unavoidable, you know, fact of television reception. And very little of my previous work has sort of been this kind of overt intervention into some sort of political question, but most of it has dealt with repetition and redundancy of pre-existing things like romance novel covers or travel postcards or something. And here was an instance where there was this redundant use of this particular phrase. So I was really interested in it more linguistically or rhetorically than politically, because you notice in the piece it's not just Bush or people from, you know, the right, but something about this phrase sort of became like a virus that infected everyone, and everyone just started spouting it. So I was concerned. I mean, I didn't really know whether or not they really were weapons of mass destruction. I had some doubts just because of, doubts I have about our present leadership.
You were prophetic in a way.
Yeah.
Turns out.
But I was aware of the fact that even then, it didn't matter, that there was a rhetorical strategy taking place to create a reason for going to war built entirely on words rather than on any kind of actual substance or real situation. And now that we know, I mean, I think that's proven by the fact that even though we now know that there are no weapons of mass destruction, that was a complete fabrication, that it doesn't really matter to anyone.
Yeah, very interesting sort of little chunk out of this period of time. I mean, I think this film will be interesting to see years from now.
It'd be nice.
What kind of other comments have you had about it, or where have you taken this?
It's been in several, short experimental film programs and festivals, like the Video Ball again. Actually, it recently played again at the Coolidge Corner Cinema as a short before some features. They've started the program doing short films before features, and they included it in that. And it's because it has this political dimension. Certainly, it's been. I've been approached by slightly not strictly speaking experimental film organizations, but more sort of politically or sort of alternative film based organizations that are interested in showing it too. So it's had a lot of exposure.
Mm-hmm. Now, what makes it an experimental film? I mean.
Well, in a way, that's a difficult question to answer because what I'm doing is playing with the form, I guess, more than I'm trying to tell a story, or in the case of a documentary, trying to address a particular issue.
Got it. Well, there's been an abundance of response from artists and obviously authors and all kinds of people, filmmakers, to what is going on. It just seems to be flooded everywhere you turn. I mean, the bookstore where I found John Boniface's book, Warrior King, there was a huge table of books about Bush. I couldn't believe how many people have been writing about the topic. So obviously some of it must, serve some purpose to the artist who's getting this out, and also there's a never-ending desire to sort of hear about it and read about it and know what's going on and form opinions. I want to show another short clip, and then we can talk about that. Mm-hmm. There was this organization that most people know about, MoveOn.org, which was really founded after the debacle of election 2000, and they had a film contest, a spot contest, to create a 30-second spot about Bush or the Bush administration, and the 10 of the, I guess, top spots are on their website, in a website called bushin30seconds.org. So if you want to check them all out, you can go and stream all the spots. But the second winner, the overall runner-up, was made right here in Massachusetts by 3 folks, and it is called "What Are We Teaching Our Children?" So let's run that, and we can talk about that.
If elected, I'll lie about weapons of mass destruction as a pretext to invade another country.
I'll call myself an environmentalist, then gut clean air standards.
Our allies will go from respecting us to hating us, and I don't care. I'll leave no child behind, unless they can't afford it.
I promise to keep you in a state of fear and anxiety, so you never question what we're doing.
And if you do, we'll call you unpatriotic.
Bring 'em on.
Well, that was difficult for you to respond to because you couldn't hear it here in the studio.
I've seen some of the other clips from their website.
Yeah. This is a great one. I mean, these kids who are pretending to run for president and saying all the things that Bush has done, like, I'll say I'm for the environment, and then I'll go strip away every policy that we've worked for, and no child left behind unless you can't afford it, things like that. Thank you for the filmmakers who made that, who were not able to come tonight because they were on a deadline. But Fred Sir, Ted Page, and Janet Tashjin. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name right, but those guys. Congratulations on that. Have you seen many other works? I mean, you teach filmmaking at a big university. People must be responding to things.
You get me started about what's going on at BU, but our film program is largely a dramatic narrative film program. But I see a lot of this kind of work at the film festivals, where I send my work and where I go as often as I can. I think it's really interesting, the responses to it, using the media to respond, because so much of this is rooted in the media, like you said, you know, using language to, like a clean sky, you know, what is it, the Clear Skies Initiative, which is in fact a program to roll back pollution legislation, or going all the way back to things like peacekeeper missiles. I mean, the use, how words can be used to change perception and change meaning through the media, and I think it's inevitable that artists will try to answer back to that process in some way.
Well, speaking of artists answering back, one of the most prolific filmmakers, documentary filmmakers of our time, of course, is Michael Moore, and his film already is controversial and it hasn't even been released. It just won the top award at Cannes, and I think after much discussion about whether it would get a distributor, it seems like now it's going to be released on June 25th. I wanted to, you know, show the trailer on tonight's show, and we are going to show the trailer, but in trying to get a copy of it from Michael Moore's team, it was very difficult, and they said just get it from the website. But the website doesn't really let you download it, they just let you watch it. So I figured out a way, and we're going to watch the trailer now.
You can make people do anything if they're afraid.
The FAA has taken the action to close all of the airports in the United States.
All commercial and airline traffic was grounded.
But we had some airplanes authorized at the highest levels of our government to pick up Osama bin Laden's family members and transport them out of this country.
In the middle of the war, the corporations decided to hold a conference to figure out how much money could be made.
Once that oil starts flowing, it's going to be lots of money. Whatever it costs, the government will pay you.
It's going to be good for business, bad for the people.
Congressman, trying to get members of Congress to get their kids to enlist in the Army and go over to Iraq.
The USA Patriot Act allows for searches of medical and financial records.
It gives law enforcement almost unlimited power.
They wait till the middle of the night. It's printed in the middle of the night.
How could Congress pass this Patriot Act without even reading it?
Sit down, my son. Well, we don't read most of the bills.
No one read it.
Members of Congress, this is Michael Moore. I would like to read to you the USA Patriot Act.
Let the eagle soar.
From the corridors of power,
Congressman,
to the streets of small-town America, to the front lines.
This is an impressive crowd, the haves and the have-mores. Some people call you the elite. I call you my base.
Comes the true story that will make your temperature rise.
I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
Thank you, Michael Moore. What can I say? You know, I don't know what your politics, I mean, I kind of know what your politics are. But you said you mostly did this as a linguistic exercise. But if we could get a little political for a minute. I'm so looking forward to Michael Moore's film coming out, and I really hope it does have an effect. And I'm loving the way Bush's polls are going down, and I'm loving all the stuff that's just making, you know, that's coming out into the open, even though it's really horrific, most of it. I wanted to just share an article that someone sent me from Florida. I know a lot of people in Florida now since I made the film down there. Bush's erratic behavior worries White House aides. In meetings with top aides and administration officials, the president goes from quoting the Bible in one breath to obscene tantrums against the media, Democrats, and others that he classifies as enemies of the state. And one White House aide says, "We seem to spend more time trying to destroy John Kerry than Al-Qaeda, and our enemies list just keeps growing and growing. The president will spend hours personally reviewing and approving every attack ad against his Democratic opponent and then kiss off a meeting on economic issues." Bush's inner circle is shrinking. Secretary of State Colin Powell has fallen out of favor because of his growing doubts about the administration's war against Iraq. And then the firing, or the resignation, I should say, of George Tenet. Apparently they were in a meeting, the president cut him off and say, "That's it, George, I cannot abide disloyalty, I want your resignation and I want it now." And then one aide said the president actually described the decision as God's will. "The mood here is that we're under siege. There's no doubt about it," says one troubled aide who admits he is looking for work elsewhere. "In this administration, you don't have to wear a turban or speak Farsi to be an enemy of the United States. All you have to do is disagree with the president." That was from something called Capitol Hill Blue by Doug Thompson. Are we running out of time? We have 1 minute. I mean, it's, yeah, I'd like to think that he's, you know, going to self-destruct in time, but you know, there's a lot of money behind him still.
And they're so savvy in their manipulation of the media and public opinion and so on. I mean, I thought that quote, Goebbels' quote that was earlier in the program was quite apt, and I tend to think of Karl Rove as the modern day Goebbels, who's just very, very aware of how to create and control opinion and values and so on.
The people are wising up, though.
One hopes.
Yes. And I want to just, in finishing, I want to say a few things, a reminder of the things that we've talked about. Certainly my film, which is playing at the MFA June 27th, and you can also find out about it on the Trouble in Paradise website, troubleinparadise.org. John Bonifaz's book, Warrior King, and there's a neat little organization that I came across, MOB, Mothers Opposing Bush. Okay, that's at mob.org. And I'll leave with that and thanking all my guests, and go out and vote this year. Good night.